Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me, or kind of with me, by the joys and wonders of computers today, Charlie Wheeler is back. He is former director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program for many years at the University of Illinois, Springfield. Before that, longtime State House reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, budget expert extraordinaire. Charlie, welcome back.
Thank you. It's always fun to be here, kind of, virtually, I guess.
It'd be nice to see you in person one of these days. And Rebecca Anzel is here also. She is a State House reporter for Capitol News, Illinois. Well, welcome back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Okay, Charlie, I'll go to you first because you and Speaker Madigan have both been working for a long time. In fact, I guess you were down here in Springfield first to cover the 1970, if I'm right, Constitutional Convention, and Speaker Madigan was a delegate to that, if I recall. He has now remains in the legal clear other than being public official A in a basically a deferred indictment that came out last week from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago saying that Commonwealth Edison, big power company in Illinois, a big utility, is paying a fine of $200 million and cooperating, saying they were doing favors for public official A, who is also the Speaker of the House, they say, and who can that be? Charlie, what does all this mean, and what is this turning to 2020 into besides pandemic and racial intrigue and unrest?
Well, I'm not sure what it all means, and I suppose if I could give a real accurate prediction, I would be going online to doing some online betting. But I think it's, so far, there's nothing that links stuff directly to Madigan, that Madigan said to somebody, you give me this and I'll do that for you. And so the feds have cast a very wide net. In some respects, it's a fishing expedition because they've asked a lot of different, they've subpoenaed a lot of different companies. They've asked for all kinds of documents. And one of the federal officials even suggested to the public, if you know anything, please let us know. So they're trying to put the case together. And so far, none of it is linked to Madigan in the way in which they could indict him. If they had the goods on him, they would have gone ahead and indicted him, I'm sure. And so all the calls for him to resign, just about all of them come with the caveat, from the Democrats, certainly just about all of them come with a certain caveat that if he has done this, if all these allegations are true, then he should resign. The only way you'll know that they're true, there's a couple of ways. One is if Mike Madigan says, yes, I did it, I'm sorry. Or the other is some court of law, a jury says, yes, we find him guilty. And in the latter case, he'd automatically be out of the legislature as a convicted individual. So at the moment, it gives the Republicans a really great talking point. It buttresses the case they've tried to make for decades that Mike Madigan is the Darth Vader of Illinois politics. Everything that's wrong with the state is Mike Madigan's fault. We have to get rid of Mike Madigan. So this adds to that, what would you say, that narrative. It's not been successful in the past. I'm not sure it'll have much impact in the long run in Illinois in November. And the reason I say that is because the legislative map is drawn in a way that favors Democrats. The demographics of the state favor Democrats. The fact that the Republican Party at the top of its ticket will have someone who does not fare very well in the estimation of a lot of people in the suburbs, where the largest chunk of Illinois vote comes from, that does not spell great problems for the Democrats. So I think until there are some definite charges against Madigan, until he's found guilty of something, I think we'll just kind of carrying on.
Yeah, Rebecca, let's talk about one of the things. Of course, just to kind of recap, and many people know this, but what the allegations are is that friends of Madigan and businesses and law firms were getting business. People were getting jobs that, according to the U.S. Attorney's documents, were sometimes little or no work jobs from the utility as kind of a favor to Madigan or his people. But again, as Charlie says, there's no direct link that shows Madigan, who I think doesn't use a cell phone and doesn't use email, or at least doesn't use email, doing this directly, but people on his behalf are saying, keep him happy. We need to keep this firm hired for a certain number of hours per year, that kind of thing. And there's also, many lobbyists who are connected with him or have been connected to him, working for that company. And so, as Charlie said, there are these calls, mostly from Republicans, but some Democrats too, step aside. Rebecca, one of the things that's kind of coming up in the fall on the ballot in just more than 3 months is the graduated income tax that J.B. Pritzker wants, the Democrats have passed. They say only the top 3% to pay more in taxes. People who oppose this say that, there with the money problems in the state right now, the middle class will be hurt if that goes through. And we know J.B. Pritzker, who is basically the greatest advocate of the graduated income tax in Illinois, as the federal government does in most states. He's put more than $50 million into the fund that will be promoting this. How does the Madigan stuff affect that, do you think?
I mean, that's a great question. Pritzker has proposed 2 versions of a budget, especially now that COVID economic issues have sort of messed up all revenue projections. And so Governor Pritzker has said if the graduated income tax doesn't pass, the state is going to have to look at massive cuts. And so on the one hand, perhaps this Madigan stuff doesn't play into it. Maybe Illinois will look at this and they'll agree with the governor that any extra revenue that could be generated from this would be beneficial. Or Illinois voters could look at what's going on with Madigan, perhaps listen to the Republicans for weeks before this Madigan stuff happened, had been asking for ethics reforms. And so perhaps Illinois voters might look at this and say, maybe the Republicans are right, and let's not give the Democrats what they want in this instance. So I guess we'll have to see. But a lot of money is being spent on both sides.
There is indeed.
Yeah, and I would suggest that the Republicans are going to go on the basis, I shouldn't say Republicans because there's some Democrats who are opposed to people who, rank and file voters. They're going to make the argument that you can't trust the legislature. If we give them this power to have a graduated income tax, they're going to do all kinds of horrible things. I mean, I saw one analyst from the Illinois Policy Institute suggested that, well, if this amendment passes, there'll be income taxes for local governments. And I'm thinking, no, that's not related because the Constitution requires the General Assembly by law to authorize local governments to do income taxes. Another point was, well, they're going to tax retirement income. No, they won't tax retirement income as a result of this. So I think if the message were focused more tightly on Madigan and his alleged wrongdoing, and that therefore we can't trust them to use this revenue wisely, I think that would be a better argument than to suggest that this will open the doors to all this other stuff, which, as a matter of fact, if the lawmakers wish to, they could do all of that stuff right now. Not having a graduated income tax does not impact their ability to tax retirement income, to authorize local government income taxes. That's all, speculation.
Yeah, and I know that the retirement income idea came because Michael Frerichs just, I guess, mentioned it as part of one speech. I don't think he was advocating, but he talked about it, so that opened up this whole topic. But the governor has said he's not for, it's known as the third rail of tax talk in Illinois for politicians to even mention taxing retirement income, which many states do, but Illinois does not. And so the governor—
And let me say,
it's not going to happen.
I have a conflict of interest. My conflict of interest is I have no income other than my retirement income, Social Security and a pension.
You mean this show doesn't pay? Anyway, I guess we're all here because we love public television. Anyway, Charlie, just one more thing back to you. Mike Madigan has weathered many storms. I remember like 2 full pages, maybe in your old paper, the Sun-Times, about all the things that they thought he was close to doing. He's always weathered it, but he's also in his upper 70s. He's also been there forever. There are more progressive Democrats, including a dozen of them, who got together and put out one of those statements saying, you know, if what is said is true, he should step aside, certainly as speaker and maybe as party chairman. Doesn't all of the years of doing this mean that people will look with a jaundiced eye at things that the Democrats in the House are doing? And doesn't this truly create more of a threat to his speakership than we've seen before?
Yeah, I would say it's more of a threat, but I don't think it rises to the level of that. He's in real trouble with the Democrats, because when push comes to shove, as I said, the caveat is, if this stuff is true, he should step aside. But I'm not sure I've seen a groundswell among the Democrats, the progressives, saying, I will not vote for him for speaker no matter what. And that's where the rubber hits the road, in my judgment.
Yeah, well,
and he's also got a very effective campaign organization, which helps elect these people. And so I think a lot of them are going to be reluctant to bite the hand that feeds them.
Well, it's an interesting time because, as you say, Republicans have been using Mike Madigan in their grainy pictures on advertisements for a long time. It hasn't worked, but now there's, you know, just more documentation of what might have happened because of the federal action in Chicago with ComEd. So we'll see where it goes. As the state continues to fight the pandemic and many people are out of work, one odd and interesting situation is an apparent kind of fraud. The Illinois Department of Employment Security, when they grant you unemployment benefits, they work with a bank that sends you a debit card, then you call to activate the debit card. Well, many people have been getting these debit cards apparently fraudulently. They didn't ask for the benefit. I heard State Representative Tim Butler on the radio in Springfield say that he heard from a constituent who called in to find out how much money was on that card, and it was $11,000. And it turns out that there might have been some sort of data breach, and many people, and I'm not exactly sure how the scam works, but maybe if you activate the card, somebody else can get the money. I'm not sure. Rebecca, this is just one of the problems people have had with the Department of Employment Security, as legislators of both parties have said, okay, Governor, we know that the department has been overwhelmed. There's so many more unemployment claims than in the past, but this fraud, plus people not being able to get their benefits or get through or get problems resolved, has been a continuing problem.
Yeah, the governor has placed blame in part on former Governor Rounder's administration for sort of cutting back with the budget stalemate. And Governor Pritzker has said that the Department of Employment Security has not been adequately funded in a while. And so that's where he sees these problems arising from. The staffing level wasn't where it should have been. The call center staff that handles these claims are specially trained. They go through a federal process. And so Governor Pritzker has said they can't just hire, 50 people and have them start doing that job. The training takes a while. And so to your question, Representative Cam Buckner tweeted that his father got one of these cards and didn't apply for it. Representative Yanni Pizer tweeted that this happened to him as well. Apparently the scam works, as you alluded to. If your information is compromised, somebody can apply for this card on your behalf. You get it in the mail. The only way it's activated is if you call it to activate it. And so I'm not sure if scammers were trying to maybe intercept these in your mailboxes or what, but apparently once they get access to these cards, they can sort of transfer the money out into a separate account. The Department of Employment Security is asking that if anybody erroneously gets one of these cards, to report it as fraud. And they think that this increase of fraudulent unemployment claims is linked to the Pandemic Employment Assistance Program, which they say was set up rather hastily and didn't have safeguards in place.
Wow. Well,
and I think part of it, what I read was, as Rebecca said, they're targeting the program of people who don't really have employers, gig workers, self-employed people. So there's no way to check and have the employer say, well, no, wait a second, I didn't lay this guy off. And apparently how it works is they apply, and as the debit cards are being set out, they tell the feds that, no, we want the money directly deposited into this account. And they set up these spurious accounts. The money gets directly deposited there, gets taken out and disappears. And it's not just Illinois, it's happening all across the country.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult problem, and there's so much money flying around because the federal government really opened the spigot too to help people in the middle of all of these shutdowns or partial shutdowns. Speaking of which, Illinois, has been in what they call phase 4 since late June, which allowed some restaurants to open, but now there's been some pullback in Chicago. In the Metro East, I guess they call it the positivity rate of the percentage of people taking COVID-19 tests who test positive has grown, I guess, above 7% in recent days. And in Central Illinois, it's been closer to 3%. And 8%, I think, is when the governor says we might have to do more mitigation and roll things back. He actually said this week that if you're not wearing a mask in public, you are the enemy because you could be not protecting yourself and not protecting people around you. And I know that's probably a controversial subject in many parts of the state. Rebecca, I know that Illinois is doing a lot better right now than some states in the South and the West, but the governor's keeping a close eye.
He definitely is. And I mean, as you mentioned, the Metro East region on Monday surpassed a 7% positivity rate, another percent, and they're facing more restrictions. So we'll see what happens there. Also on Monday, the mayor of Chicago just is, closing down in-person dining in restaurants and placing other restrictions. And so I think as we see surrounding states, especially the ones neighboring us, as well as, Texas, Florida, and California sort of facing these increased spikes, that Illinois might see more restrictions as our cases also continue to rise.
Right. And Rebecca, I know you've been following it, but there's also many of them with an attorney named Tom DeVore from Montgomery County, or I think that's his county, who has represented various people, including State Representative Darren Bailey, taking on the governor, saying that he's overreached his authority by telling businesses all over the state to shut down or how to act. He's got a lawsuit on behalf of a couple of his children who go to Hillsborough High School and are athletes, saying that Illinois, the governor's office shouldn't have the opportunity to tell the Illinois High School Association, a private entity, how to enact rules for sports in schools, which, I know I spoke with Mr. DeVore, and he thinks everybody just assumes they have the power to do that. He says they don't. We'll see if courts decide otherwise, because the IHSA has been the governing body for high school sports for a long time in Illinois. But the status of those lawsuits, Rebecca, they're still out there. They're hanging around, and the governor just basically says, "Please follow my rules." I haven't seen strong enforcement of the rules anywhere, but it's just a continuing conflict as this COVID crisis goes on.
It is. And I think at the heart of Representative Bailey's lawsuit you mentioned, there's two rather interesting questions that the Supreme Court at some point should probably address. One is whether a governor can issue successive 30-day disaster proclamations to manage the same disaster. The law doesn't say clearly either way. And the other one is whether, the statute that created the Department of Public Health says that that department has, quote, supreme authority to shut down businesses, isolate residents. And when Governor Pritzker has issued those orders, he cited the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act, which is a different thing. And so Mr. DeVore is asking, who's right here? It's my understanding that the Supreme Court is watching these cases go. They can't take control. A lot of people have been asking, why doesn't the Supreme Court step in? The Supreme Court steps in after discovery is done. So after all the facts are submitted to the court. And because Representative Bailey's lawsuit is still in district court in Clay County, the Supreme Court can't sort of reach down and take it yet. They're waiting for everything to be finished. On Wednesday or Thursday, Mr. DeVore filed an additional count in Representative Bailey's case. So that's another argument or another complaint. And so that is still going. He's dragging that out, and we'll see how long it takes to resolve.
Yeah. Charlie, I know you probably have some thoughts about this, but it is just an ongoing thing. I'd like to turn also to another big problem that everybody has in Illinois: what to do about schools. You mentioned earlier, I don't think you named President Trump as someone not particularly popular in suburban areas where there used to be Republican strongholds, and may overshadow politics in Illinois this year. But President Trump, his tune has been changing a little in recent days, but he had been saying for a while, and Betsy DeVos, the federal leader of education, Secretary of Education, They want children back in schools. Whereas Governor Pritzker and the State Board of Education in Illinois have said school districts, and we've got 850 of them in Illinois, have to make your own decisions. And as we're seeing these roll out, there's lots of different decisions being made. Hybrid, some kids going to school, some kids staying home, some kids going to school 2 days and then off for 3. Charlie, if you were governor, given your being around state government for so long, how do you handle this, and what happens? It looks like it's just kind of up in the air for so many districts and parents.
I think this is a kind of a decision that can't really be made and in Springfield and handed down to all of our, how many, 850 school districts. And I'm not aware of any school district, but I haven't surveyed all of them, that has said, yes, we're going to open and all we're going to do is have in-person classes just like before. I don't think anyone has said that. And that's kind of what initially the president and the secretary were urging. And I think for parents, it's a tough decision. What do you do? Ideally, if in fact you could do social distancing, if you could have cleaning supplies and protective equipment and everybody wore a face mask and there was enough room to do all this stuff, yeah, you could do it. But in reality, how many schools are equipped for nothing else to buy all those face masks, all those gowns, all those gloves, all the sanitizing equipment? How many have enough space that you can set each kid 6 feet apart from the other kid? The classrooms that I've been in, I can't recall ever having been in one where kids were spaced 6 feet apart. So the practicality of it is very difficult, and it's a tough decision for parents, and particularly for parents who have to work, where in normal times the school district would provide free daycare for their kid. Now the schools are only open half time, or if they're doing remote learning, who takes care of the children? And I know, for example, in my case, my grandchildren are older. One's in middle school, one's in high school, and my daughter is not going to send them back to school. She's going to do the remote learning, which is an option for District 186, the Springfield School District, because she's just not confident that they would be protected under the outline that's been set out by the school board.
Yeah, well, it will be an ongoing big story really everywhere, and it's a very localized story, as you noted, Charlie. This last week, last Monday was the deadline for third-party candidates and independent candidates to file for election. Willie Wilson is a businessman with a lot of money in Chicago who has run kind of a perennial candidate now, but he's running for U.S. Senate. So that adds to Mark Curran, the Republican, former Lake County Sheriff, and Dick Durbin, clearly the favorite in a Democratic state of Illinois right now, running for re-election. But also we had a presidential candidate, Rebecca, that some people have heard of. His name is Kanye West. He needed, under court order because of COVID, only 2,500 signatures. He turned in apparently more than that. Last I checked the State Board of Elections, as we tape this show, I haven't seen anybody objecting to his petitions, but he could end up on the ballot or he could not. That's really weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So he turned in 3,178 signatures.
Well, you've been watching. Okay.
Even if somebody, and I would anticipate somebody will challenge his petition filing, he has some wiggle room in there. We'll see what happens. And yeah, we could see a Kanye 2020 come out of Illinois.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. You know, he's married, of course, to Kim Kardashian West, and I noticed an article in the Tribune that she is saying, again, he has bipolar. He's been saying weird things. People should show compassion and understand mental health problems. So that's kind of interesting. And we'll see where that goes.
I would add, though, if kind of the standard rule of thumb is, if you're required to file 2,500, you file at least 5,000. And so 3,000, if it's a challenge, it may be that he won't make it onto the ballot.
I definitely agree, Charlie. And there were reports that day that people right outside the State Board of Elections were going up to people saying, hey, can you sign a petition? If they were being that last minute in doing it, you and I know, having watched some of these hearings over the years, it could well go south if real lawyers take him on and figure out that yes, we can get them off the ballot and not give people who are not paying attention just the opportunity to vote for a celebrity and instead of all those politicians they hate. So with that, I think we are about out of time today. We'll watch this crazy, crazy year in this kind of odd state. Rebecca Anzel, Charlie Wheeler, thanks for sharing this time with me. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.